Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of Iblis Manifestations Podcast. I'm honored to be joined on this very special episode by none other than Yosuke Konishi. He is the owner as well as the founder of the very well known underground metal label Nuclear War Now Productions. I would make the presumption that most people who tune into Iblis Manifestations and follow this particular strain of underground music are already more than familiar with this particular label and especially their collaborations with the Ross Bay cult side of the Canadian scene. And I don't think that there's that much of an introduction required on that side of things. But what I can say is that in a world of metal where you have got your nuclear blasts, you've got your season of mists, you've got your century medias and napalm records and all, who of course are very highly respected and have built a tremendous profile of their own over decades at this point. I would go as far as saying that Nuclear War Now Productions are on par with all of those labels. And if anything, I think that their presence in the underground metal scene has been absolutely crucial. Not just for preserving a certain specific trajectory of this particular musical genre, but more so in preserving the real essence of metal and the rawness of it all. And I think that Yosuke is someone who really has worked hard to achieve this, and I respect him as an entrepreneur and also as a metalhead. So, shortly we'll be coming my conversation with him. We got to, of course, discuss a lot of things about music, about life, about fitness, even, and about how to keep a sane mind when dealing with the today's world. And yeah, we perhaps maybe even dove into some topics of politics, and we just let it flow. And that of course made this to be an extremely rewarding and extremely eye-opening conversation, at least for me personally. So I hope that you as the listeners and the viewers will take away a similar experience. One of the main reasons that we sort of ended up having this conversation on this episode to begin with was the most recent project that Yosuke has been putting together, and that, of course, is called Helios Press. And what he's doing with his team up in America at the moment in Texas is that they're basically making their own pressing company. And this, I don't know if you people might be aware or not, but is a very, very expensive thing to do. However, it is certainly something that I personally have faith that they're going to be able to pull off. And not only that, it may very well become an incredibly positive benchmark within the underground scene as a whole. However, they are taking donations to make this company up and running and basically get it on its feet. And this is something that I'm quite passionate about, and I will certainly be supporting the company myself. And I encourage you to check them out as well. And I encourage you that if you've got anything to donate, this is a big cultural movement. This is not just a let's say a business maneuver, but I like to look at it as a cultural thing that we are all a part of, because the more we have control over the underground and especially the physical aspects of things, which is, for metal, that's arguably the most important part, if not one of the most important aspects of metal, is something that it's tangible. You get to hold it in your hands, and you get to smell a vinyl, and you get to look through the lyrics, and you get to look at the artwork, and that's really what creates for a truly special experience. And of course, for them to be taking the leap of faith to make this project come to light, is a lot. So I do encourage you to, of course, check them out and give them your support. I believe that they'll be starting their donation campaign from the 1st of March, okay? Which won't be too long after this episode comes out. So, with all of that said and done, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you so much for joining me on Iblis Manifestations Podcast. If you are new to this podcast, well, first of all, welcome. We tend to have quite deep, nuanced conversations with various very interesting people, predominantly from the underground music scene. And yeah, we tend to go deep in. There's no really any filters or anything when it comes to our conversations. So with that in mind, if you do enjoy the content that we're putting out there, please do consider sharing it around, subscribing to the channel. The subscription part, believe it or not, even though it's free, does really make a positive impact on the channel and, helps us bleed through the algorithm. So with that in mind, I do very much appreciate your support. And a couple of more things to mention before we go into the conversation. My band Trivax recently released an album titled Ilowa Burns Out. This record came out via Colt Never Dies, and it came out September of last year. So if you like a bit of straight to the fucking point black and death metal with a touch of melancholy, then I do recommend you to check this album out. You can find a link on the description for this episode, and we would, of course, very much appreciate your support. And on top of that, perhaps a little bit more relevant to this particular episode, my band Trivax are also going on tour with none other than New Zealand's own Diocletian. And we'll be doing a string of shows together in April this year. It'll be at the tail end of April and early May, and we'll be going all over the place from Newcastle to Manchester, London, Bristol, Birmingham, everywhere in the UK. So, and from my understanding, this is actually Diocletian's first proper run of the UK. So it would be foolish to miss out on that if you reside nearby. Okay, so be sure to check out those dates. And the final thing I wanted to share with you before we go into the conversation part of this episode is that if you are looking to improve your life mentally and physically, and of course we all know that the mental part is heavily influenced by the physical side of things, well then of course I will be offering online coaching services. So if that's something that you'll be interested in, you can check out the link in the description and you can contact me directly there and then we can get talking. I've had plenty of my own trials and tribulations and trial by fire, as I like to call it. And I know what it's like to be out of shape. I know what it's like to be depressed and anxious and have zero control over your life. But there's only one solution to that, and it's that you fucking do something about it. I chose to do that, and some years later, I am now in a position to help other people achieve the same thing. So if that's something that resonates with you, please consider getting in touch, and we'll see what we can do. So now, ladies and gentlemen, with that introduction out of the way, I once again thank you very much for joining us for this extremely special episode. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Yosuke Konishi to Iblis Manifestations. All right, Yosuke, welcome to Iblis Manifestations, man. I have to tell you, man, I've been really looking forward to this one for a variety of different reasons, and I've followed your label for a very long time as well, and I may also be a customer, as I already mentioned to you earlier. So how are you doing, man? How are you doing this afternoon in Austin, Texas?
Yeah, very good. I just did an interview with Jesse from Witch's Hammer. So my mind is already in that kind of mode. So let's talk.
That's good to hear. You mentioned something about them doing a documentary on blasphemy, or can we not really talk
Yeah.
about that
So
much?
yeah, Jesse from Witch's Hammer is making a video documentary on blasphemy. So that's in the works still, but I just contributed to that documentary. And I'm not sure what the timeline is, but hopefully we'll see it this year, and it won't take as long as it takes for them to write a new album.
That sounds cool, man. I think if anyone was worthy of a documentary, especially so many decades on from now, it'd probably be Blasphemy. That would be a fascinating thing. I would love to watch that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're just not a normal band. There's a lot of cool stories and anecdotes to go with Blasphemy, so I think it'll make for a pretty interesting documentary whenever it's done. Yeah. And I know that some people have asked, but I am still working on a box set of just, the previous recordings of Blasphemy. There's not going to be anything past 2001, but yeah, I'm still working on that.
Well, that's great to hear, man. That's great to hear. The way you said they're not a normal band, I don't think there's a better description for them actually than the way you put
Right,
it.
right. They're special in their own way. I mean, chaos follows them like it's yeah, it's just a they live the blasphemy, black metal lifestyle, and they're kind of like mayhem, chaos follow mayhem. Chaos follows blasphemy as well, and um yeah, it should make for a very interesting documentary when it comes out.
It's really fascinating. There's a lot more of this that I actually want to unpack with you and just the general dynamics of working with these types of bands. Well, I say these types of bands, there's not really many other bands like that anyway.
Mhm.
But I do want to uncover that. But just first of all, I'm very excited and I want to congratulate you on the path that you're taking with Helios Press. Where are you at currently in the process for that?
Yeah, so yeah, thanks for that. So Helios Press is a vinyl pressing plant that we're building here in Texas. It's about 2 hours from where I'm sitting right now. And so far we have a building and we have 4 machines coming from Germany in the next few months. Probably sometime in May it should be here. But yeah, the building is now getting renovated. We're stripping all the insulation out and putting in brand new insulation because it's hot as hell in Texas, and it's just how it goes. If we don't insulate it very well, then it'll just become a hellhole inside. So we're prepping the building for the factory build out. We're going to be running a fundraiser campaign starting March 1st through our website. We were considering Kickstarter, but we decided against it because I just came to the realization that Kickstarter just takes 10%. And the value add there isn't exactly 10%, in my opinion, because I already have an established business,
Mm.
online business. So, Kickstarter is essentially just a pre-order e-commerce site with some other features built on top of it. But the value added there is usually extra eyeballs, but I have plenty of eyeballs and I have the attention of most of the metal scene, at least the underground fans, and I
Mm.
can speak to them directly. So I came to the realization I can just run it through my own store and have more control, run it for longer, not give them 10%. And yeah, I mean, there were other reasons, they first rejected our campaign. I could have petitioned it and probably had it overturned, but before that, I just came to the realization, why fight this? I can just do it on my site. I mean, this is just a shitty high-tech company with their own agenda, and why should I give them whatever 10%? Because if we do raise like 200,000, that's a significant amount. I would be giving them $20,000 out of that.
Yeah.
So I can do a lot with $20,000. That could be another air conditioning unit for the building. So I thought about it and I decided against using a big tech company. Instead, we're just going to run it through our own shop and yeah, basically get all the money going towards the factory instead of going towards the pockets of these tech company giants. They don't need any more money.
No, yeah, I feel you, man, and I respect that decision completely. And I know it's not easy as well because a lot of times as well, people, even people who make donations, they want to stick to what they know and what feels comfortable because they just want to feel like they've made the contribution and then they get to walk away from it and then it be like a safe thing. But I think that in your case, you will probably be able to get away with that just because of the niche that you're targeting and the fanaticism that actually
Right.
exists within this following of this style of music. But then again, I also understand that you're not doing the pressing exclusively just for war metal, and
Mhm.
this is pretty much going to be all genres of music. Am I correct?
Right. Right. But the fundraiser campaign will be geared towards my audience specifically.
Hmm.
Because I just don't have any clout with other people right now. So I've proven myself over the course of 24 years, I've proven myself to the metal community. So I have the attention of the metal people. I've gained their trust. So I already have a platform that people can trust and buy from. That's all that Kickstarter is providing for people, right? It's a trusted platform. It's time proven. Other people have used it and it works. So that's basically the value add that Kickstarter is providing. But I already have all of that. Maybe I would have gotten a little bit more from Kickstarter, but since they take 10%, I really don't think I could have gotten more than 10% of non-metal people contributing to this campaign. So, I did the math and it just made more sense just to do it on my site. So yeah, after Helios Press is up and running, and we've proven ourselves in that sphere as well, in the record pressing industry sphere, then we will obviously reach out to other genres of music and labels and try to press for them as well. Our agenda with Helios Press is to serve everyone, but we would rather press for independent labels, not like Sony and Universal. They can press elsewhere. It's not to say that we won't press for them. I just don't want them to clog up the pipeline because that's what's happened with almost every factory out there. During the pandemic, it really went to shit. We couldn't press anything
Yeah.
because the bigger labels were just taking up all the capacity, and also there were supply chain breakdowns and the flights were grounded, so air cargo wasn't a thing anymore. We had to ship stuff by like literally by ships. So we definitely don't want to create that environment again. So once Helios is up and running, we will cater to smaller labels, smaller bands first. And if there's still capacity left, obviously we'll take orders from bigger labels because we are running a business.
Well, the thing that I really want to commend first and foremost about that is the fact that, I mean, this is just for anyone else listening to this right now and thinking that, oh, yes, so there's a new vinyl pressing plant and they're raising money to do this. Okay. The thing that I want everyone to think about is that this is a cultural movement. Okay, and this is a very necessary cultural movement, because the physical side of music in general, it's especially in heavy metal, it's the thing that allows us to really live and breathe that genre. Just being able to actually hold that physical copy in your hand. And I remember because when I grew up in Iran listening to underground metal, I didn't actually have any physical copies. It was just like bootleg shit that I got from like my guitar teacher or people. So when I first actually came to the UK, I went to an HMV and I was taking pictures of the Venom record there because I was like, oh my God, I am actually fucking seeing this in person. So it was
Mhm.
almost like an anomaly there. So the thing that I want to emphasize here, and this is, you can give me your feedback on this as you wish, but the way I look at it is that there's a massive cultural movement happening here with Helios Press, and it's a very necessary one, and it's one that is going to affect things at a larger scale. And it just so happens to be a business, and that you are the person and your team, of course, that are going to take the time and the energy to actually make it happen. So this is something that ultimately benefits all of us who support this style of music.
Yeah, I mean, taking control of your destiny is something that every metalhead and everyone in the underground needs to do. The DIY mentality permeates almost the entire underground, right?
Mhm.
Going back to the days when people were just tape trading and creating their own demos. There was no Photoshop, so you had to do everything cut and paste. Going back to those days, which I was also part of as a youngster. I think that that learning experience is what I'm building my business on, And the good thing is the underground isn't just metal. The underground actually is under every subgenre out there. So I can reach out to people in other subgenres and genres. It could be underground rap. I don't listen to that stuff, but I still think that underground music of every type is important, and it's part of a counterculture that needs to be supported. So it could be punk rock. Punk rock differs very much from metal, but if you look at it, it's pretty much operating in the same way. They record themselves, they try to self-produce as much as possible, they book their own gigs. So, while maybe politics might differ, it's pretty much the same thing at the core of it. They're doing something that is going against the grain of society that might be frowned upon by normal people, but they're creating their own artwork, you know. So when I say artwork, I mean everything from the audio to the visual to the text. And that's why physical media is very important. It's a package of everything, right? It's the entire vision. It's not just files on the internet. Files on the internet might only touch on two aspects of it, maybe the visual, maybe the audio. And I don't know, maybe, if you can combine the text somehow. But in most cases, if people are listening to music online, it's just a passive type of listening experience, right? You go to YouTube, you click on a link, you see some images, but in order to get the lyrics, you might have to go to metal archives, and most people are not doing that. It's not a very active listening experience. They're just putting it on and then doing something else, which is
Yeah.
fine too. I do that all the time. I think passive listening experience is part of life, but when you really want to sit down and grasp what the artist is trying to convey, you have to have a physical medium. And I think the best physical medium is the record, because it's 12 inches big. 12 inches is pretty big. My eyesight's not as good as it used to be. So when I'm trying to read the lyrics on a CD booklet, which is like 5 by 5, I'm just really squinting and trying to
Yeah.
get to the text. And sometimes I'll put text over images and it just makes it hard to read. So I like the 12-inch format because usually the texts are not that small. I can read the lyrics, I can read the liner notes. If there's a booklet that comes with it, even better. The entire context is better represented at that size. I mean, this is not to say that there's shitty art. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that for the art that I like, I think it's best represented at the 12-inch size. So yeah.
I, I agree with that. I think for me personally, I generally have a lot of sentimental values when it comes to I guess life in general. But in the case of metal, that's something that
Mhm.
definitely rings true for me. And a part of that is because when you get the vinyl of a band, it almost feels like you have access to a part of that artist. Now it doesn't matter how many copies there exist. Like doesn't matter if it's thousands or if it's just 666 copies or whatever. It's like we all know that. But at the end of the day, the number of those copies are finite, and there's something really special about just being able to hold that and then have it in your like on a shelf somewhere, or have it on display, and actually taking the disc out, looking at the artwork, and then having it on the turntable, and then putting the before
Yeah.
the album starts. And There's a magical experience to that because it almost feels like it's almost like you're feeding the egregore of that artist, but there's also like this whole experience to it that you just don't get from having digital copies, you know. And again, that's a great way to discover new bands, you know. Admittedly, I think that's something that also, if you're not taking advantage of it, then you may be missing out, depending on what your goals are with the band, of course. But at the same time, there's just like a whole experience to it, you know, and that's why I'm personally just very supportive of these kind of movements, you know, and the same applies to actually going to shows in person as well. You know, you can watch YouTube videos of someone filming shitty footage from their phones all you want, but it's just not the same as being there and smelling the sweat and then feeling the vibrations through your entire body.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I'm not against other formats. I like vinyl 12 inches the most, but every format has its value, including digital files on the internet. Like you said, digital files can be a good way to just sample bands to figure out what you like and what you don't like, because, you know, not everyone has unlimited cash to just buy records left and right. So you have to sample stuff to figure out what you actually want to buy, which is fine. But if the artist is actually good, right? And this caveat is very important because there are plenty of terrible albums out there. You know, I would say that it's a small percentage of albums that I actually like that comes out now. So I think that part is important. And I know that art is subjective, but there is a line at which you have to kind of draw and say, this is just shit underneath here. You know, they shouldn't even come out on vinyl or CD. But the thing that I really like about vinyl is that when the artist does it correctly, from the visual to the audio to the text, it's the complete package, and it's the most respectful way to consume that product, because you have to listen to it in a linear fashion from beginning to end. It's harder to skip over, you know, unless you're standing in front of the turntable and you're lifting the needle and dropping it to the next song or whatever. It's much harder to skip, you know. On a digital file, you can just skip so easily. You know, I tend to do that with YouTube videos, like, oh, I don't like this part. Like, or a lot of times with YouTube videos, what I do is just skip the intro because I just want to hear the songs or whatever. So I just skip the intro. It's almost like a commercial in a podcast. I just want to skip those and move on to the good stuff. You can't do that with vinyl records, for good or bad. You know, if the album sucks, then the not having ability to skip may be a bad thing. But if the album is good, or if the album takes a bit longer for it to permeate into your brain and actually get processed, then you have to listen to it. You're forced to listen to it. And I think that's a good thing, because that's how the artist intended for the album to be listened to, not random songs skipped over, right? And if the artist is actually thinking about the album as a whole, then they will probably write that album for the format. So usually, you know, it was the case that you would start out very strong and kind of taper off towards the end of side A, and then pick up very strong on side B, and then end very strong on side B, like Fallen Angel Doom. For some reason, on Fallen Angel Doom, Ritual starts side B. And that makes total sense because Ritual is the best blasphemy song to many people. So they start out with their greatest song on side B. It's kind of a genius move. You would have expected Ritual to be the very last song, but I think the Desolate one is the last song on Fallen Angel Doom. So, I mean, there isn't a bad song on the album, in my opinion, but
yeah.
I mean, Ritual is the strongest one, but they start off Ritual as first song on side B. So I'm pretty sure that was on purpose, you know. And I'm sure there are many examples like that in the history of metal, where the artists really put their mind towards crafting an album, and they thought about how it was going to flow across the two sides, you know. Because if you think about a 12-inch record, it's a pretty archaic format that goes back to, you know, the beginning of 20th century. So the technology has been around for a very long time. People have put a lot of thought and science and social studies into how the album is consumed. So I'm pretty sure this is kind of like standard practice with people who actually think about albums in terms of the format. So yeah, that was my long-winded way of saying that 12-inch format is the best. But tapes do the same thing, sort of.
Hmm.
CDs are not the same way, but you do have to stand up unless you have a remote control to skip songs. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
it's,
think.
it's like mhm.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. I think what you made a really interesting point there about the just the skipping the intro part, because I find myself doing the same thing as well, you know. But at the
Mhm.
same time, imagine if you were offered the same opportunity, let's say back in the 80s, 90s, if you put on the batteries, the return, and then you just skip the intro and then go straight into the opening song, or if you
Mhm.
had the same for, I don't know, Blood Upon the Altar, or I don't know, or just even like any, or even just with like Celtic Frost, first couple of releases and stuff.
Mhm.
That intro thing really makes that happen, and that's a different time, where you don't go on Wikipedia or Metal Archives or whatever, searching the band's name. Oh, this is so and so. This is how old they are. No, this was a time where you have no fucking idea what you're hearing, so all you're getting is just this ominous noise, and it really sets the tone for the real experience of metal, where you really get to feel that, and a part of it is just leaving stuff to the imagination, which again, by the way, I think that's something Blasphemy always did really well. And or perhaps there wasn't much to imagine anyway. That's just what they are, but I
Mhm.
think that's part of what makes the metal experience what it is. It's not knowing, and it's that degree of ominous feeling that comes with it. But just to open a slight tangent here as well, you said something that really stuck with me there, and I want to kind of open this up a little bit with you. But you mentioned that there's you draw a line sometimes, so with certain bands, like if they're shit, they're just shit. And I find that interesting coming from a guy like you, because with the sort of subgenre and the counterculture that you particularly deal with and have done for 20 odd years now, sometimes that's something that becomes easily formalized. So now, what do I mean by that is, let's say a band want to say they're war metal, just because they have certain types of riffs, a certain aesthetics, a certain sound, or whatever. I
Mhm.
personally don't think that makes them good. I think that there
Right.
has to be something at the heart of a band, and I believe that you must have had so much of that thrown at you all over the years that it must almost be tiring to say, "Oh yeah, it's that thing again." You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think history repeats itself all the hell fucking time because people are trying to create something new, but not everyone should be creating music. Maybe their talents are in something else, or maybe they're just talentless. Whatever the case, so much stuff comes out now. I would say maybe 90% of what I carry, I'm not so into myself. But music and art is subjective to some degree. Um, so I don't know. Maybe I say 90%, but maybe it's only 50%. Who the hell knows? I just don't like 90% of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think, subjective doesn't mean that there isn't an objective line somewhere. So maybe I draw it too high and I cut out too much, but there must be a line at which, you can say this is all just crap underneath and it's worth ignoring. Um, so I do believe that that actually exists. uh, that might piss off a lot of people because I don't know. I mean, people are all about equality these days, but I'm more about hierarchy than equality. I feel like you have to actually prove yourself and create something of worth before you're considered my equal. You're not my equal if you're just some bottom dweller copying some other bands and doing nothing new or creative. So yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I think it's just that the psyche of today's younger people, maybe they've been
Mm.
coddled too much. They've been told that they're okay when they're not.
Yeah,
So, and
participation
the
trophy crowds.
right, exactly, right. So I get emails like today I got the funniest email. I was sending it to my friend. The guy said, uh, the subject title says something like promotion for my black metal band. And then he said, can you promote my band? What is the cost? I have no idea what he was talking about, but I'm assuming that he was asking me to take his like no name band. He didn't even introduce himself. So he didn't even have the courtesy to say, hey, my name is Mike and I have a black metal project. Can you listen to it? If you like it, can we maybe work together? It wasn't like that. It was just like, can you promote it for me? So people expect everything for nothing, they're I don't know. I don't like the current world we're living in. I feel like meritocracy is out the window. We need
Mm.
to go back to a world where meritocracy ruled the land, and the weak people were just pushed aside.
Yeah, well, there's lots of things to unpack there, but that's interesting regarding that email that you say. To me, that's either, I don't know, some 15, 16-year-old somewhere with no social skills or some autistic guy stuck in a basement. But I think, the way I look at it as well is that, it's that only the inferior are the ones really demanding equality, because if you felt confident enough in what you did and I don't believe in, this is one thing just for the philosophy of it, the way I look at things is that I don't believe in deserving things. I only believe in earning them. And I think that's something that
Right.
especially the younger generation are extremely misguided on, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree to maybe equality of opportunity, maybe like
For
it's
sure.
kind of fucked up that people are born into terrible situations, but it's just life at the end, I didn't grow up in a rich family. I grew up in a middle class family. We were not super poor, but we were not super rich. Good for me. I was able to, get myself into a situation where I could afford to buy a house and stuff. So, but I did it on my own. You know, it's not like other people did it for me or something. But that's not to say that people are born into terrible situations and they're just dealt a really terrible set
Mm.
of cards and that's how they're born. So I mean, I do wish that some people had better situations growing up. But other than that, I would say meritocracy should be the rule of the land. And I don't really believe in equity. That's the equality of outcome. There's no such thing as equality of outcome.
Yeah.
There's only whatever you make of yourself and whatever you make of your band. There's no such thing as a free lunch. You have to earn it.
Absolutely, man. You're preaching to the choir there. So speaking of which, I mean, you've had nuclear war now for over 20 years. You've been hard at work, and essentially, you've done this. I know you did this alongside a long time career that you also did, but also at the same time, essentially, you are the definition of what an entrepreneur would be. So one thing that I want to discuss with you is that I mean, running a label is not an easy fucking thing to do, and
No.
to have done it at the level which you have done, I would arguably say that probably Nuclear War now is one of the most important labels in metal scene period, because I feel like it's even if it's just a matter of, I don't know, licensing stuff, I still feel like your choice of bands are always ones that in my world need to be kept alive. Does that make sense? So I think the thing that I want to get to is personally, how do you deal with the pressure of that? Because there will be a lot of pressure. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of emails on a day to day basis. There's all these new
Yeah.
releases. There's everyone demanding their attention. There's all these plans for festivals and whatnot, and that you've, of course, been putting on. So, how do you deal with that pressure and how do you stay on top of things?
Yeah. So as we discussed offline, I think what's important if you're trying to accomplish something bigger than what you think you can accomplish. So I tend to take on more jobs and take on more than I can actually deal with in a single day. So what's important for not just me, but for everyone else, I think, who's trying to do something bigger than themselves, is to keep a healthy body and mind. It might sound weird coming from somebody who is, promoting the most nihilistic type of music out there, but if you want to, live past 30 or so, then you really have to think about, okay, I'm feeling nihilistic now, but is that really my entire existence forever? You know, the label is called nuclear one hour because it represents this nihilism that lives in everyone's body, right? And everyone's mind.
Mm.
Um, we have tendencies towards that as humans. We also have tendencies to be productive in society, to be a family person, to create something of worth. So, as long as nihilism isn't your entire existence, I think it's okay to listen to nihilistic music and take something from it. Maybe it's cathartic to listen to nihilistic music. But to have an existence of nihilism is to be self-destructive. So, plenty of great music have been created by nihilistic people. I mean, look at Joy Division, right? That guy pretty
Yeah.
much he created great music his entire existence, and then he killed himself. Um, Maybe that was his mission, but whatever the case, I mean, look at like John from Dissection. I'm not the biggest Dissection fan, but that guy, you can say he lived what he was preaching. So he
Hmm.
was a Satanist and he was nihilistic. He saw death as something greater than life. So that's what he did. He created art, put it out there, and then died. So I don't really, I don't see anything wrong with that. But if you want to create something for much longer than past 35 or something, then you have to keep a healthy mind and body. And one of the things that I do nowadays is first thing I do in the morning is I put on my clothing, put on my socks, put on my shoes, 6 in the morning every day, just run as hard as I can up the hill because that wakes me up first of all, and
Mm.
I feel like you have to organize your life in a way, and I'm talking about not long term, but every day. You have to have a routine that helps you reach your goal. And since I'm under so much stress, I have to have some sort of a release valve, and having physical fitness as part of my routine and doing something difficult in the beginning of the day really helps. So I do that, I run up the hill, I come back, it only takes me like 5 minutes or something, right, to do that. But I'm completely clear in my mind because I can't really think when I'm running as hard as I can. So I'm very clear in my mind. My body is already warmed up. I'm 100% awake. And then I jump in a shower, but I take cold showers because that wakes me up even more.
Yes.
And yeah, you do that too?
Yeah, man. Every single fucking morning. Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we know exactly what we're talking about then. Yeah.
Hmm.
So there are many benefits to, taking a cold shower. If you work out, then you may have joint problems like inflammation or whatever. So, and it also increases metabolism. Um, but the thing that I like the most is just mental fortitude, because when you're staring at that shower, 6:30 in the morning and there's only cold water coming out, it takes some mental strength to actually just walk yourself in there and just take it like a man.
It
So
does.
it does. Yeah, I mean, people should try it out for even 2 days, it's not easy. So I try to introduce this hardship right at the beginning of the day, just as a mental exercise. And the health benefits are, whatever. I haven't been doing it for that long. The cold shower thing's been 6 months. The running thing's been like about a month or so.
Oh, cool.
So yeah. So yeah, I think if you do that and then start your day that way, just getting 300 emails is, whatever. It's stressful to deal with them, but you learn to deal with it. And other things that you may not want to deal with, it just doesn't seem that tough when you when you had a cold shower in the morning.
It's really interesting hearing that coming from you because I have personally been through that exact same train of thought and actually understanding it and then seeing the impact that it has. I think
Yeah.
that in a world where we are all so comfortable, so constantly we're in air conditioned places, whatever food we want is always provided to us, and you know, in a world like that where we're not required to go through any real challenges, we make our own challenges, and this is kind of what I think fucks up society a little bit, or perhaps a lot, is is that lack of perspective. But to your point, I completely agree. I think the real value of discipline is simply just being able to do shit that you hate to do but do it like you love it. And I think that in the case of I mean, there's training, but then training can be fun for a lot of people as well, but then when you're doing the cold, there's nothing fun about that. And
No.
like you said, like you said, there's the going in that's hard, but then staying in is, I think, even harder, because you're like, oh fuck, you keep trying to move away, but then you have to keep reminding yourself, hey, don't be a pussy, just fucking go back under, make sure you're getting your head and your neck and everything in there, don't
Mhm.
avoid it. You know what I mean? I sort of started that a couple of years ago and did it on and off, and it kicked my ass. But then since around March last year, we were actually in the middle of a tour with Darvaza here in the UK, and there was like
Mhm.
one day off where I went back home, and then on that day, I just decided I'd give the ice bath thing a try, and I tried it for like a couple of minutes, and I screamed like a bitch. But then after that, it became like within like 2 3 weeks, it became a daily ritual, that I did it for like 6 months straight, and nowadays I just do it like over the weekends when I've got more time, basically. And that's
Mhm.
a tough one. I don't know if you've done that, man, but holy shit,
Yeah, I
that's
tried it, yeah. Yeah, I
yeah.
love it, but it takes so much ice to cool the water that
Yeah,
it became kind of expensive. In Texas, the water doesn't quite get cold enough if it's not
of
winter
course.
like right now. The municipal water, because it's just running in pipes outside, it
Mm.
doesn't get that cold. So you have to get a lot of ice. And it was costing me like $12 per bath.
Yeah.
So um it wasn't like just viable. Maybe I'll get a ice chest and convert it into an ice bath at some point and put it on my porch. That's what a lot of people do. Right now it's
True.
okay because it's so cold outside that the pipes are still cold. So the water coming out of the faucet is cold enough.
That's it, yeah. And the thing is with that, a lot of people, you always see these people online. I wonder what your thoughts are on that, but you always get these quote unquote gurus or whatever coming out saying, oh, coal exposure is not good for you. And all it does is increase your cortisol, and it's bad for you. You might get a heart attack, or this and that. And then
Mhm.
to me, that's a very clear indication that they're just afraid and they just haven't done it properly,
Yeah,
because
and like if it was so bad, then why are there cultures like Finland and Russia where ice bath has been a thing, or like, you know, on the opposite end, saunas and thing too in Finland. So they've been doing
yeah.
that for generations and centuries, and that's part of their culture. Um, yeah, my wife is Finnish, so I know a thing or two about saunas and the benefits of that too. I wish we had a sauna, but we don't, I
That's
think
cool. I
those
was
two.
gonna ask you if you've ever done any contrast therapy before.
Yeah, I have. I wish I could have done more because saunas are just not that common in the US. You could say that summers in Texas is kind of like a sauna. You can just go outside and it's like, some crazy temperature. So in a way, if you just stay outside in the summer of Texas, it's kind of like a sauna. And if you jump into an ice bath right after that, it's you're getting an ice bath.
It's incredible. Well, there's this place in Drammen in Norway, because I've visited there a few times. So we're actually going back in just over a month for Inferno Festival, but we're gonna go there, and it's like the sauna is like this little hut on like a boat, and then the
Mhm.
boat is by the river, and there's like I don't know what would be the Fahrenheit difference, but It's
Yeah.
fucking really cold in the river, but then the sauna is equally very hot. And then what you do, you've got the place for like 90 minutes, so you just get to keep going back and
Mm.
forth between the two, and it's something else. You literally feel high for the rest of the day. You know, I mean, I don't take any drugs, I don't drink or anything like that, but I used to, and I know what it feels like to take drugs, and this is exactly the same. If anything, it's even better.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know what I
because
mean?
dopamine's getting released, yeah, whenever you
Yeah.
do it. Yeah. So I wanted to do that. There's just not a place in Texas to do it. So I guess I need to travel to some Nordic country, maybe go to Finland one of these days again and do it. Yeah, because they do that in the winter for sure. They do the sauna ice bath. They just go into the lake or river or whatever, like you said, yeah.
Apparently, their businesses actually go down quite a bit during the summer because no one cares to do it enough. It's only over the winter where people do it. It's very interesting that.
Hmm. Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
I really want to try that because uh I know the endorphins I get from just the ice bath. I can't imagine doing both at the same time because the extreme temperature. I mean, I've been in those saunas. They're super hot.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, just going back to the discipline thing, I think what's really valuable about what you're saying there, doing that first thing in the morning, especially, I think there's this element to it where, like, if you do the most uncomfortable shit you can do the first thing in the morning, then there's
Mm,
nothing else in the rest of the day that can even bother you, especially if that thing that you're doing is self inflicted.
right. No, I totally agree. I mean, there are things, but they usually don't happen. Like your dog getting hit by a car or something. Obviously, that's much worse than a cold shower. But
Sure.
in the course of a regular day in modern society, cold shower is going to be your worst thing of the day. That's going to be the most uncomfortable thing that you will be exposed to in a day, because
Mm.
most of the time we're working in front of the computer, or in my case, just listening to metal records in my stores, whatever. I'm kind of blessed that I'm working just this record label at this point. I don't have to go into an office job, because that was a different type of hell. Yeah.
Didn't
But
sound
yeah,
like you were enjoying the normal job
no,
at
and
all,
now
even though
that
you did it for so
being
long.
so I had my degree, or I got my degree in biochemistry from UC Berkeley. At the time, I was very much into just I guess the search of knowledge as far as biology was concerned. It was very interesting to me.
Mm.
But once I entered the workforce and started working for a corporation, that spark just started to get smaller and smaller, and the flame just went out.
Mm.
After a couple of years, corporations will do that to you because they don't, I was not in research and development. I was just in the tech support department. So
All right.
I can't complain about the pay. The pay was great. And it allowed me to create a record label on the side. I was basically supporting myself with the job and then kind of siphoning off money into that label. And for the first 10 years or something, I was always subsidizing the label with, my daily job money. So, and I was able to raise a family. I still, I got another one on the way, so it's not done yet. But
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm kind of starting a bit too late for the second one, but it is what it is.
How old are you now?
I'm 48 this year.
Damn, man, you do not look it at all. Well, you could easily
Oh,
take 10 years off of that.
thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, that's another thing, right? With age comes health problems, and I'm trying to delay the health problems as much as I can by exercising almost every day, and doing these routines like ice bath or cold showers or running up the hill. All of these things are part of my mission to continue doing what I'm doing now. And what I'm doing now isn't like physically challenging, but it is mentally taxing because I'm juggling so many different things at the same time. So even to a 20-year-old, I'm sure this will be challenging. To a 48-year-old, I don't know. I've gotten used to it, but I'm guessing that a regular 48-year-old doesn't do this. Um, and I want to do it into my 60s, 70s, 80s. I take a lot of inspirations from these YouTube videos on these Japanese channels of old people working until they're 100 and whatever.
Yeah.
So Japan has the oldest living people, right? They've always had it. And part of so I study these people because I think it's very important to figure out what keeps them going. It's not just diet, that's part of it, but it's also the need for motivation. So your brain starts to die off if you don't have some focus or mission in life.
Yeah.
What's common between these old people is that they have some sort of focus and they have some life spark in them because of that focus, be it work
Mm.
or I don't know, some other, it could be just like hobbies or whatever the case. They have some mission in life that they're still trying to accomplish, even at age 85. So, when I go to Japan, I like to visit the most ancient places, Nara, Kyoto. Um,
Mm.
because on the streets you always see really old people and they're usually still working into their 80s or 90s, and
Oh.
when you talk to them they just tell you, I making mochi on the street is my mission in life and I don't want to give it up, you know so that's basically it. I mean, I'm making records. In my opinion, I'm curating art. My record label is basically a curation. It's kind of like an art gallery in a way, but with sound and visuals, of course. And it might not be highbrow, but it is art. Um,
Absolutely.
you know, I think necrophago brutal mutilation is just as artful as any other high art, out there.
Mm.
So I treat it as such, and I try to have this mentality of I'm a curator. I am putting together what I think the culture should be focusing on. Um, so like right now, I'm on a mission to curate Eastern European stuff, especially Russian art, because for whatever reason, people are so stupid. They're demonizing Russians right now just
Mm.
because we're in a war, a proxy war with Russia.
Yep.
You can't even mention the word Russia without getting attacked. It's kind of funny. People are so shallow and retarded. So yeah, just as a fuck
That
you,
they are.
yeah, just as a fuck you to these people, I'm now curating Russian art, and
All
they
right.
don't even sell that well, but I don't care because I think people need to focus on this stuff and look past current politics and focus on art that's created by people from other cultures. And I think Eastern Europe actually has a lot of good stuff that's still hidden. I don't know why it took this long because there aren't any Western labels focusing on Eastern European metal at all, like especially Russian records of the past. Um, so yeah, it's kind of it's a mission for me right now is to highlight those bands. I mean, in the past, I've done similar things with Brazilian bands.
Mm.
When I did the Impurity Lamb's Fury, that band was not even on anyone's radar. But I think it's more commonly known that Impurity was kind of like Brazil's Beharit or something, or
Mm.
I don't know, some bands from Eastern Europe that I've highlighted. I think they benefited from that. So yeah, I see the role of record labels as curators of good music rather than just a business that sells music to collect money. There are plenty of those, and I don't like those as much. You can usually tell
Mhm.
because they will release only stuff that sells. So you can tell when somebody's just in it for the money. Well, obviously we all have bills to pay, so we have to balance this, it's a balancing act of making sure that we have enough money coming in to fund this bigger project of a record label that releases both, stuff that sells and stuff that doesn't sell. So I
Yeah, so
think
you
it is.
wouldn't be doing like 3,000 copies of an old Magnesium EP or something out of nowhere.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So obviously, I wouldn't press so many copies of something that I know would not sell that many, but I think it's still good to do them. in maybe
Mhm.
smaller quantities. And, there are many labels out there that are doing the same thing. Iron Bonehead, Iron Pegasus, Iron Tyrant, the three Iron bands or labels from Europe. I think they're all doing stuff that's curating their own taste and putting it out there. Um, Other newer labels like Zombie Dance from Belgium is doing a very good job of curating music that um, I think should be focused on. They focus more on the old styles of like South American black metal and Eastern European stuff. Um, yeah, Life Eternal is doing something very interesting, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of other labels out there that I think are really doing something creative and curating bands that, even I wasn't even aware of. So, yeah, props to them. Ajna from the US, he's always done whatever
Yeah.
he wanted to do. You can tell that it's like 100% non-commercial. He's just focusing on bands that he wants to release, and he's been doing that since day one. I remember seeing his ads in magazines in like 97 or something. He was just the distributor of Malicious Records titles back then. And yeah, he did the Tormentor picture disc, even in the 90s when nobody gave a shit about Tormentor. Now
No.
they're just like almost like a household name. So, there are plenty of labels in the underground doing what needs to be done, which is to release music that people should listen to, and they curate those bands based on their taste. I think that's very important.
The thing I want to get into, since we're onto this topic now, is just the general longevity of the genre. Because this is something that I've been pondering about for a very long time. Going back pretty much, obviously from my background, it was starting in Iran, where you're not even allowed to fucking play or listen to this kind of music, to then actually playing it there underground, to
Mhm.
then actually getting the opportunity to come to the UK and then do it for real, basically, and actually become familiarized with the live music scene and actually see these bands in person, that we only ever saw on TV screens back home on bootleg copies and shit. The thing of it that, and for me, as I can absolutely recognize that in you, is that passion to actually preserve the culture, because it's our culture, and there's nothing that's ever going to be really replacing it, rather.
Mhm.
The thing that I find interesting, and I try and think of things in a bigger scope, and I try and think of life in general in a more statistic manner, and I do question, because one thing that you and we were speaking about this offline, was just the general, I suppose, nihilism. I guess that's the word that we keep coming back to,
Mhm.
and how that applies to this style of music. And I do feel like, now, without sounding like a complete elitist douchebag, which I may very well be, I think there's this element of it worries me that the degree of degeneracy and the nihilism that's within this style of music, which so many times creates the best moments, may also become its downfall. Now, what do I mean by that? It's the cultural implications. It's the implications of constantly being a lone wolf, having no desire to ever come out of where we are, and that stubbornness, which on one hand is a valuable thing. On the other hand, what concerns me is the fact that, because, let's look at the UK as an example here, because one thing that keeps happening here is that venues keep getting closed down, grassroots venues, which are
Mhm.
absolutely essentials for bands to find their foot in,
Yeah.
because you only get better by expressing yourself and then getting to do what it is that you're doing, right, as a
Right.
band anyway. And that keeps getting replaced with things like flats or other types of
Mhm.
things. And a big part of this, at least in the case of the UK, is because you now have a ginormous Muslim community or Asian community who
Hmm.
have zero interest in interacting with this style of music, and families would literally disown their kids for engaging with this, which is not too far away from how it was like where I grew up as well. I was lucky that I had a very open-minded family and I kind of got away with it, but then I still didn't get away with it in the rest of society. And
Right.
then now you have this portion of society multiplying that culture, and then they're constantly having kids, they're constantly supporting each other, they're constantly growing in their community. And I worry that this metal thing, as much as it might be hot now, as much as, there's still a lot of people alive, in the long run, I worry that this is going to get replaced. Some people might say that, oh, metal already died anyway, it's just a graveyard of the undead now, blah, blah, blah. Okay, also maybe a fair point, but I don't like that approach and the view.
I don't
So,
agree with that. Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure as someone who's so knee deep into the thing, you certainly won't be of that school of thought. But to me, what do you think, what would you say is the way that we can really actually preserve this genre? Because it's going to take effort to do that, and it's going to take a lot of work from basically everyone who listens to this music to actually make sure that it carries on. Because also a lot of metalheads don't even have kids, so that music doesn't really get passed on through kids either. So just statistically speaking, that's actually a very
Yeah.
unpopular but important part of it, I would say.
I think maybe the tide is shifting slightly from total nihilism and this unhealthy lifestyle of crash and burn that was so prevalent in the metal scene for a very long time. I mean, obviously, it's still there. Alcoholism is a very big issue in the metal scene.
Right.
Drug use. I have plenty of friends and bands that I work with who are no longer making music because they're so fucked up on drugs. You know.
Right.
So it's unfortunate. And these are very creative people, but their self-destructive behavior created the art, but it's also destroying art at the same time. So people really need to learn how to moderate their nihilism. And they need to understand that it might be a creative force for some, but it's just going to lead to death at some point, at least death of art for them.
Mm.
Because you can't play music if you don't have a place to live. I've seen that happen. I've actually
Yeah.
seen that happen to prominent bands that I work with. They don't have a place to practice. They don't even have a guitar anymore because they have to pawn it off or something. It's just not a good situation. So,
That is really
people
sad.
really need to, yeah, people really need to balance their nihilism. I'm not against it. I might sound like it, but I'm against it in my own life. But, I understand the creative energy comes from many different things. And that one of those things, at least in metal, is that destructive nihilism that dwells in everyone out there. Like I said, the record label kind of touches on that, the record label name at least. Um, yeah, I mean, I took it from Throbbing Gristle, and they're one of the most nihilistic bands. It's
Yes.
it's, it's like kind of dark humor, I guess, that a lot of early industrial bands had. So I took cues from them. Um, but later on, you can listen to like Psychic TV, and it's all happy techno. So
Mm.
it was clear that he was not just a nihilistic person after all. That was just an expression of part of himself, and that's why he wore a T-shirt that said "Nuclear War Now," and it makes total sense to me. And people kind of make fun of the record label name because I'm from Japan, and Japan was nuked twice. So they'll just look at that and say, oh, he's kind of a hypocrite. He's from Japan, but he is promoting nuclear war. Why is that? These people are retards. They just can't see past
Yeah.
metaphors.
Yeah.
They take everything literally. It's just the same type of people who say, "Oh, he's not for equality, therefore he's a Nazi or something." They make these mental jumps. Yeah. So yeah,
That's
I don't
something
know.
that's quite common at the moment. I mean, I don't see any traces of that, but I even heard that people were saying that about the festival that you recently did in
Yeah.
December, you know, whereas I
Uh,
have many friends who attended that. Sadly, even though I was in Berlin, unfortunately I couldn't make it there because I was at another festival. I think there was like three of them happening, and I had already been, arranged to
mhm.
go to this other one, and was kindly invited by them. But
Mhm.
it was very strange to me, that I knew so many people who went who are the opposite of that, yet the allegation will still get thrown around. I don't know if it's just because of a certain aesthetic, or if it's or people just chat shit for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Where do you think that comes from?
Uh, I think people want to have a mission. So weak people seek to destroy because they don't have the energy to create. It's much easier to tear down somebody else's creation than to create your own, right? So
Hmm.
I think that's what's happening in society. The whole cancel culture is a feminine energy, a very negative feminine energy that's being manifested by males and females. But ultimately, this sort of like behind the screens type of bullying and cancel culture in general, you can see the same tendency in teenage girls talking shit about each other behind the scenes. This is a very toxic femininity that's being manifested in society and propped up. Um, so yeah, I mean, it can happen in both sides. It doesn't really matter which side of the political spectrum you're on. It's a tendency that happens on both sides. Look at what happened in the 80s with Tipper Gore when she was trying to
Hmm.
cancel metal, like Slayer was getting shit,
Yep.
rap music was getting shit back then. So it can happen on both sides, it's just yeah, I mean, that's basically what it is. It's like toxic feminine energy that's been manifested in society, and it's propped up for some reason by big tech companies. And
Yeah.
it's the
Well,
flavor of the month. It's just what people are into right now because it's easier to destroy than to create.
I think that's very important because usually as well what they go after is not the real deal, like there's much bigger targets they could go after, but they only go after some musicians on minimum wage who probably don't even have the ideology that they think they do, just
Right.
because they don't announce that they're of the same team or the same group. It's a very interesting thing, I think there's a lot of layers to it. One is the fact that, people who just haven't got their shit together, their own life is a mess, but to avoid looking within, they simply just go after other people, and then they try and throw out accusations because that to them gives them a mission to accomplish, essentially. Um, I
Yeah.
think that a big part of it that kind of bothers me is it devalues any sort of legitimate threat that might also be there, So it wouldn't surprise me, and I've said this many times, but some years from now, the pushback against all of this shit's going to be so hard that I think that literal fascism is going to be something that's going to become normalized just because of how much people hate these supposed accepting diverse people's approach to things.
Yeah, what's happening right now is what Nietzsche predicted many years ago. It's the vacuum that's filled when religion leaves. So I'm not a religious person at all. I grew up in an atheistic family, and I can say that maybe I'm agnostic. So I might
Mm-hmm.
believe in some sort of spirituality that's not really tied to any religion, but I'm a very practical person. So I know that there is a self inside, and there's also an energy force that's inside of me, and I can do certain things to feed that energy force. um, and I can also do things to subtract from it. I know when I'm being toxic and I'm taken away from that energy source, right?
Hmm.
So I guess that's my long-winded way of saying that, what Nietzsche said about God is dead. I do believe that humans are such that they look for meaning in life through different things. So when religion was taken away, um, just because it went out of fashion, in the Western world, religion just slowly died away. It just was not in fashion anymore. But people still needed the scaffolding for how to structure their lives. So now I think politics is taking that need, and now politics and like this kind of cancel culture, you can really tell that these are religious zealots going after heretics, because the way you can tell is they're just as dogmatic about the belief system. You have to believe in the entire scripture, right? You have to believe in A to Z, otherwise you're a heretic. You can't be
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, well, I'm not really a racist, but maybe we should have border control. You're a heretic. You're a white nationalist. You
Hmm.
know, it's a very religious movement that we're seeing right now. It just happens to be on the left, but it could easily be on the right.
Yeah.
It's the same type of tendency. You kind of see it on the right, but they just don't have much power right now. So right now it's being manifested on the left, and it's propped up by the governments. It's propped up by special interests. It's propped up by businesses. I don't believe for a second that businesses give a shit about diversity, inclusion, and equity. I just think that they're doing it because they're trying to sell products. And right now it's in fashion.
It's the same thing with even companies that sell vegan products or like fake vegan burgers. It's the same companies that are selling meat, but then the same ones now have a vested interest
Right,
in selling that. It's not about morals or ethics. This is about money at the
right,
end of the day.
right. Yeah, yeah. But what do you think about this theory? I mean, I didn't come up with this theory. Other people have been saying it for a long time.
Yeah.
Do you think that the vacuum that was created in Western society, where we've just been kind of running on the fumes of Christianity, is now opening up this gap, this gaping hole in people's belief system, and it's getting filled with identity politics, some leftist ideas, and leftist politics? Do you think my theory is correct?
What I will say is that, I mean, first and foremost, my background and what I grew up with is an Islamic state, right?
Right.
That's what
Hmm.
I grew up around.
Right.
And I grew up in a place where women aren't allowed to ride bicycles in the street. They're not allowed to leave the country without the consent
Right.
of a husband. And then there's like legitimate inequalities, which are pretty fucking horrendous.
Hmm.
And that's just in the case of women. They execute you if you say anything against Muhammad. Even though the guy was obviously a fucking pedophile. And there's all of these different things that they will do, and it's very much an Orwellian situation. Like, it's literally 1984. And for me, what was extremely alarming was a few years ago when the whole COVID thing hit,
Right.
and then at first I was like, okay, you know what? Why would they lie? And then it took me a month or two, and I realized that, oh shit, deja vu. I've already been here before.
Wow,
And
that's very interesting. This is the first time I heard of that take on it, but I can totally see it. You could say that in Iran it's more like a religious authoritarian right-wing type of oppression that you've experienced, right? But now in the UK and the Western world, what we're experiencing is some sort of authoritarian left-wing communistic type of oppression. It's kind of crazy. It doesn't really matter which side of the political spectrum. The tactics are very similar. They start telling you, A is B. If you don't say A is B, then you're a heretic. And
precisely.
I mean, the whole Muhammad thing, I guess, is very true. If you say something negative about Muhammad in any way, then you get shit for it in Iran. I mean, do you really get executed? That's fucking crazy.
Yeah, so I actually had Nikon, the guy from the band Confess. They kind of made a bit of noise. He's from same city as I am, and he got arrested for it. But in his lyrics, he only criticized God. So if you only criticize God, you get something like up to 5, 6 years in prison. But if you
Wow.
criticize, but that's because God can forgive you. But if you criticize Muhammad, you'll get executed because they're dead and they can't defend themselves. So that's the shit you're
Wow.
dealing with.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, and
Huh.
Muhammad, you got to take into consideration that he married his wife when she was 6, but he was kind enough to wait until she was 9 before consummating the marriage. So that's a religion that at the moment it may be the second biggest, but let's say 30 years from now, I would say it's possible that the majority of America is gonna be Muslims, and I think that's a terrible fucking thing. That's my
Yeah,
opinion,
I mean,
but
at least the UK is going down that road right now,
exactly.
wholeheartedly. And you have to think, what is the agenda? Why is the government allowing this to happen so widely? It's not just the UK, but rest of Europe is experiencing very something, very something akin to that. I mean, it might not be all from the Middle East. It could be, Africans. And this is not to say anything bad about any of these countries that they're coming from, but if the reverse is bad, then why is this okay? If it's bad to invade, let's say Uganda or whatever, then
Mm-hmm.
why is it okay then to invade Italy the same way? Is it just punishment? Are European countries being punished for their past sins? I just don't
Yeah,
understand. Because from an outsider's perspective, I'm an outsider in every sense because I'm not native to the US. I came here as an immigrant. The thing that I liked about the US and the thing that I like about every other country is that every place is somewhat unique. It's not homogenized. It's not Starbucks. It's not McDonald's. When I go to Italy, it's very Italian, right?
hmm
Um, I haven't been to London in a while, so I can't say, but I know that Paris doesn't really look like Paris these days.
yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, so I don't know what the agenda is here. This has nothing to do with race or ethnicity or anything. I want India to look like India. I don't want it to be overrun by the Brits. Um, just as I don't want Italy to become some homogenized, multi-culti wasteland. America is a bit different because it was kind of founded as a multicultural society. But I also don't want America to become Mexico, or El Salvador, or, well, I don't know, Venezuela. I guess Venezuela is like the biggest immigration problem right now. We're getting a lot of Venezuelans right now. But yeah, I mean, whatever the case, I mean, it has nothing to do with their home countries. I'm not against anyone's home country, or ethnicity or race or whatever. I just feel like cultural preservation has to be important on some level. Otherwise, why even visit these places? If it just ends up being like another McDonald's version of America.
I
But
think that the modern world does a fantastic job of making people forget where they come from.
yeah,
And that doesn't mean necessarily nationality necessarily, but more actually just ancestry, I feel. Of course, nations do come into place, and I feel like perhaps spiritually speaking, we're maybe aligned on certain things just from what you've said. But I think that even just the idea of a country is something that has an energy of its own. It's like an egregore because blood has been spilled to charge that energy of the flag and what it
mhm,
means. And I know that this perhaps might be strange coming from someone who is like yourself an immigrant, but this is something
mhm,
that I will not let go. I always have been respectful of the what this country offers in Britain. Although, of course, it is actually partially that it's their fault that Iran is also in the situation that it is now. If you want to look at history and go back to the time of Mossadegh and the coup that they did, but that's a different topic completely different tangent. But you're talking about what's this agenda of all of this. I think it's very clear, and without sounding conspiratorial, um, I mean, I wasn't a refugee. I came here legally, and I've paid my dues. I've never claimed a penny from the government here, and I understand that there are other people who had to do that, and
Mm.
to each their own. But I would say that it's very clear that there's an agenda of destabilization. You even look at the current conflict between Israel and Palestine. I mean, to me, when I look at that, is yes, there's the war itself. Yes, there's a lot of ideologies involved. Yes, there's history involved in that. But what's more important to me, if I may sound completely selfish, is the preservations of things over here. So if you got people completely at each other's throats over this thing that's happening on the other side of the world, yes, it could affect us. Yes, there's great injustice, this and that. Yeah, I get it. But what scares me is the fact that, think of it like this. If you were to take a guess that every immigrant who has entered Europe, let's say since 2018 onwards, because that's when we had a big surge of it,
Mm-hmm.
if you were to take a guess of which side they support, they will almost exclusively all go for Palestine because of their background, because of the religion that a lot of them hold. Okay? And you might say, oh, wow, that might be a good thing because it means more support for them. What you might not be taking into consideration is the fact that to a lot of those people, of course, not all of them, but a lot of them will simply look at someone who is from the West as an infidel, as an enemy, because you're not one of the same thing. So,
Right.
what you've got now here is the perfect ingredients for civil war. And what happens when that destabilization happens? What happens when you've got civil war in Europe is, well, you let chaos ensue, you let people become desperate, you let the grid go out of fucking control, and
Mm-hmm.
then food supplies get cut short. You've seen the way they've attacked farmers. And
Right.
then now you give that a little bit of time, you let it settle, and then you, the governing force, will come and impose your own will. And then now all of a sudden you've got the perfect ideal of globalization, which is the thing that we all must vehemently oppose, as far as I'm concerned. Just
Yeah,
my
I totally
opinion.
agree. Yeah, we're on the same page, I think. I mean, I think as a tangent to that, I could be, I might be off the mark, but I feel like the whole COVID thing was a test drive for how to control the masses, how to divide and conquer. Because they had us fighting over the vaccine and some stupid shit over lockdown. But the people who really benefited were people in power and people who had these multinational companies who were benefiting left and right from the shutdown and the vaccination. So I feel like this is the test drive, and then there's another agenda, maybe an environmental one. I don't know. I feel like the next thing they'll use is, oh, climate change, this or
Yeah.
that. We must stop building here or there. Um, I mean, as another tangent to this, what's happening in the San Francisco Bay Area where we were located previously, I feel like that might be another social engineering of a situation because you're letting the homelessness situation get out of control. Property value is going down. And then what you're seeing is multinational companies coming in and just buying the property. And it would be very easy for the government or whoever was in power to just come in and then control the situation, get the property value up again. And then these companies would benefit greatly from it.
Well, that's
So,
what
this is
BlackRock has
definitely,
been doing. BlackRock has been
yeah,
buying
BlackRock is
properties
just
in
one of
bulk.
many companies doing that.
Yeah.
And also, countries are coming in and buying as well. Like China's coming in and buying property in the Bay Area. So,
Which is
this is just
fucked
a
up.
theory. Yeah, it's totally fucked up. I believe that there is a solution for the problems that they're experiencing in terms of crime and homelessness. But as long as I was there, it wasn't something anybody addressed. Realistically, they were just throwing money at it and pretending like they were doing something, but it was never taken seriously. It was mostly just posturing and yeah, and nothing was being done. I get the feeling that the situation is actually socially engineered to be this chaotic right now because it is lowering property value. It is thinning out the population, and whoever's left are the desperate people who just can't leave, or the true believers. They think that they're in a place where, so it's just polarizing the places even further. And it's much easier if everyone's on the same boat to control. So that's my theory on, what's happening in the Bay Area. There might be a bigger agenda at hand here that we're not seeing.
I would agree. I think it's fairly clear at this point to deny that there isn't one. I mean, you look at everything. You look at all the pandering bullshit that's happening. And I think that it's one of them things. But the issue that kind of bothers me, and I guess this becomes more relevant to us in particular, is that I was very disappointed in the in just the general approach of a lot of the metal communities. Just stands on this whole thing, where you've been singing and talking about rebelling and, living life on your own terms. And then now all of a sudden you're saying, oh yeah, stay at home and wear your mask so you don't kill granny. I mean, it's very, very, very strange to me, and, I think that there's a degree of nuance that just completely got lost there in the middle. I'm sure that there's a lot of us who still perhaps think at least a bit more freely, and by free thinking, I don't mean that they should necessarily agree with you and I or everyone else, but rather actually think freely and think for yourself. Dig deep into the gray areas, if anything. And I think that that's really the thing that's missing the most. And my issue with it is that the more you see shit like that, the more you also see the people on this side of the spectrum, the metalheads that go far right, but then they'll buy everything wholesale ideology. They say, okay, well, this is real, this is real, this is real, because everything that they said is a lie. Where it's like, no, it's somewhere in the middle on a lot of these things.
Yeah,
And you
it
got to be able to
usually
think
is.
for yourself.
Yeah, the funniest thing I see on the right are people with no value, right? They haven't created any value themselves, but they will cling on to the accomplishments of their race as if they can own that 100%. I just find that to be the funniest, Like
Yeah.
you're just a fat guy and you just happen to be of that race. Don't take credit for everything that was done by your people. You didn't do any of that. You're just a lazy fuck. You know, go make something of yourself before you take pride in somebody else's accomplishments. I can understand having cultural pride or something, or having, I don't know. I mean, I guess in-group preferences are just inherent to humans, right? So I can understand that level of like, preference where, I do prefer Japanese culture to a lot of things just because I'm Japanese by heritage. So I can understand that kind of in-group preferences. It's probably ingrained in the DNA or something. There's, let's say, probably something very deep in the spiritual realm. And I'm just talking more in a practical sense, not in a religious sense. I think there is something embedded in the DNA that's causing this. It could be something that's related to evolution,
Mhm.
because obviously you would trust people of your tribe or something. So I can understand it on that level, but taking the accomplishments of your people as your own is just pitiful. So um, I guess that applies to pretty much any side, but I see the right wing doing this a lot more.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a real sign of insecurity as well. I had my friend Darko. He's a fellow fitness coach, and I spoke to him here before, and we said exactly the same thing. Is that there's a lot of people who just want to take credit without having done anything, and that's the route that they will go down. And then this applies to someone who wants to come out as a random gender because they get attention for free, and the same applies to someone else who wants to say they're better than everyone else just because of the race that they come from. And I know this is going to hurt a lot of people's feelings on both sides of that, and I don't care. That's my truth. And I think that this is the kind of conversation that we need to be having more often. Is what have you actually done? I mean, just looking at yourself, man. I mean, look at what you've built with the label and everything that you've done. If you were to go around left and right saying, "Oh, my ancestors are samurais," hell yeah, I am this and that, and then you would have never done anything. You know what I'm saying? It's all about
Right.
building your own path. It's all fantastic being proud of who you are, where you come from, your lineage. I'm very proud of being a Persian. That doesn't mean that now defines my entire life. No, I still have my own path to dig and find, and I think it's just about finding that nuance at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, I think cultural heritage is something that's very important to me, and I think preservation of that is also very important. Just as Indians need to preserve their Indian heritage, it's just as important for Brits to preserve their British heritage. And there needs to be some sovereignty to each country. We can't have an open border. This is clear. I think it's just a pipe dream that people have of open borders and freedom to travel and all this stuff. It's fine to go visit places and have some level of immigration. Obviously, I benefited from immigration, so on one hand, it might sound like a hypocritical statement for me to be talking about border control, but I came here legally just like you. And I understand people are coming from desperate places and they're
Mm.
escaping real violence. And I'm not completely against refugees or asylum seekers, but there needs to be some limit. It can't just be an open border everywhere in Europe and in the US and elsewhere. Canada is also affected by it. I think Mexico to some degree is also affected by it as well.
Hmm.
Um,
And the fact that in the States they're trying to introduce no voter IDs, I think that tells you all you need to know, really.
yeah, that's never gonna pass probably because it's in the Constitution. You have to be a citizen to vote. But
Mm.
I think the other bigger agenda in the US with free immigration is probably seats in the Senate, because that's based on just head count. You don't have to be a citizen for that head count to happen. So
Of course.
census is based on whoever is in that state. So let's say that California declares itself as a sanctuary state, then obviously a lot of the immigrants or the illegal immigrants will go there, and then the census numbers go up, they get more seats,
Hmm.
and that could skew the votes going forward. So I think on some level that's happening in the US at least. I don't know about other countries. And I think ultimately probably the biggest agenda right now is destabilization and divide and conquer. I think that's what the biggest agenda is. People in power, they just want power and money, right? They don't really care about left and right politics so much. There might be true believers in there about certain political belief systems, but for the most part, I do think that, multinational companies and defense companies, they're just in it to make money and to gain power somehow. So the
Exactly.
more destabilized the population is, the better it is for control. We saw this firsthand during COVID. Everyone was fighting each other over masks. Who the fuck cares about masks? They're like canceling jobs. They're just like outright canceling even movement of humans,
Mhm.
That's what we should have been concentrating on, but people are fighting about stupid masks, you know.
Yeah,
So
because they were afraid, because they were scared.
probably, yeah, they were afraid because there was a legitimate disease, although it turned out to be not as severe as people made it out to be. There was a disease after all.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and people were scared, and I think that fear was weaponized by the
Mhm.
elites to control us.
That's one thing that you say is interesting. That oh yeah, there did turn out to be a disease, and it's
Mhm.
like yeah, there was, but then at this, because there's a lot of people who probably still don't believe it was a real thing, which is like okay, cool,
Yeah.
but at the same time, just because it's real doesn't mean that then there's that then everything else is right either. I caught the virus multiple times, pretty much every time
Mhm.
was different to one another, but I never got vaccinated, and I managed it fine. I know it hit people differently, but the thing is as well, um I was lucky that I was in a position to actually get to see with my own eyes that, oh, yes, they're fabricating the statistics, that they're lying about the number of
Yeah.
injuries. They're lying about how many people are getting heart attacks. I knew three people within the age of 30. One of them was even a client of mine, so I knew him fairly well, who, we'd just about stopped working together. And then, like, 3 months later on some travels, guys 30 years old just drops dead of a heart attack, and there's so many people who got all kinds of injuries and things, and no one's accountable for it, and then it's a scary thing, but all it tells you is just don't fucking trust everything that you see, DTA, as Stone Cold Steve
Yeah,
Austin used to
especially what
say.
the government tells you. Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, when the people who are sponsored by Pfizer is telling you to use Pfizer's products, and they're suppressing information coming out about, people getting injured, you just have to wonder, why are these people so gullible, why?
Hmm.
And like the other thing that really bothered me in the underground was the so-called rebellious people from the punk scene who used to be anti-government, these so-called anarchists, were falling in line, and they were posting memes about people wearing masks. Like by 6 months into this bullshit, it was pretty clear that it was not affecting young people to the same degree. But
Yeah.
everyone was pretending that it was like the same health outcome for everyone. I can understand protecting the vulnerable,
Yeah, yeah.
but there was plenty of data by then that kids were not affected, but they were still closing schools. They were not the transmission vector, and old people were not contracting the disease from kids, but they were just locked up. And like my kid was in, seventh grade, eighth grade, and she had to deal with this bullshit
Yeah.
for 1 year before we moved out of Oakland. Texas, luckily, was more of a free state. So by the time we got here, everything was open. Nobody was wearing masks. Everyone kind
Hmm.
of knew, oh, this disease, you know, really affects unhealthy people and old people. So those are the people who really had to stay home. The rest of us should have just been working because, you know, plenty of people starved to death because they couldn't feed their people. It just doesn't make sense to just close down businesses. People don't realize that businesses actually mean a lot to the livelihood of those who actually are employed by them. Not everyone works for Target, not everyone works for Walmart. So,
Yeah. And it's family businesses that have been built over decades of hard work, day in, day out, and it's only sustainable as a result of sickening consistency and sacrifice over the years of
oh
the
yeah,
entire
I mean,
family.
just look at the number of restaurants that closed down, and restaurants are some of the smallest margin businesses out there. They're really hard to sustain,
Yeah.
and they're usually owned by family members. There aren't too many chain restaurants out there. It's mostly just mom and pop, family operations. And I saw so many of them close down in the Bay Area, and it was heartbreaking. I don't really understand why people are okay with that, because after the first 6 months, I swear all the data was out there, And you saw lots of data coming out of Sweden because they didn't close down to the same degree. So there was like apples to apples comparison. Obviously, like the population is different, the demographics are different, health outcomes are going to be slightly different, but there was enough data from every country to say, this demographic, young kids were not affected by it. People under the age of 45 were not affected by it to the same degree. They might be going home uh, for a couple days because of COVID, but they're not going to die from it. Almost everyone my age survived just fine, right?
Yeah,
I got
absolutely.
it just once. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And how did you feel in that time?
It felt like shit, but I got over it. My job actually forced me to get the vaccine. So I didn't, I took the Johnson and Johnson one that was actually later canceled. Like they had to take it off the market because it was
Yeah,
causing harm. So I did the
yeah.
one I took because it was a one shot and that was it. I didn't want to take it, but my job was forcing me to.
Hmm.
So I took it, and it didn't protect me from the virus. I took it, and it didn't protect me. So I don't know why I even took it. I probably caused my harm, more harm than it did good. So, and I've heard similar stories from other people. People who took it and just got numb legs or whatever, or
Hmm.
numbness in some part of the body, or you know some headache that wouldn't go away for a very long time. These are all anecdotes, but the fact that they're suppressing these anecdotes tells you everything.
Absolutely. And to me, it's absolutely reminiscent of criticizing Islam back home.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like I know this is, of course, this is my personal anecdote, but it's an extreme, and it's one that is just undeniably um, identical to the situation that we all dealt with. Like
Yeah.
for me, I did crazy shit. Like when I was 16. At one time, like we literally used to go to like a park. I was like 15, 16 years old. Used to crack on some fucking, I don't know, 1349 I was really into at the time. So used to play it out of like a phone, and then, we'd burn the fucking Quran alongside it, in the corner of a park. So we were rebelling, but also making sure the police didn't see us, because if they saw us, that would mean that we'd get killed.
Hmm.
And all these kind of things. But then if you dared, now of course that's pretty extreme, so what are you doing? But even though I guess we're only just burning a book, what does it mean? But you try and reason with someone who is of that faith, and they believe that everything that they believe is correct, and then everything else is wrong. Everyone who disagrees is an infidel, and this and that, and then one day we'll take over the world, blah 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 blah. This is the mindset, all right? And it seems to me that that exact same mindset existed within everyone who was defending this bullshit agenda. And all of it came because they were afraid. All of it, this is the core of everything. This is the biggest problem, is fear of death, right?
Hmm.
Because what does religion sell to people where it has such a strong hold on them,
Right.
and people's minds? It's the fear of death. No one knows what happens. So
Right.
it tells you this is what happens afterwards, and I'll give you this comfort and safety knowing what's going to happen after this thing that you don't know. But in return, I expect this degree of loyalty and devotion, and then you got to do as I say. And I feel like this was the same thing. It's like, oh, COVID's the boogeyman. You might die. So let me offer you some safety and comfort, but then in exchange, you got to do this. You got to stay home. You got to get vaccinated. You got to
Hmm.
wear your mask, and then you got to do all of this. And to me, it's just so identical, and it's unavoidable. It's impossible to avoid the resemblance between that. And I bet you that a lot of people who think they are anti-religious or whatever probably have a very hard time digesting that thought,
Hmm.
because it just breaks them apart. It's like, oh, I can't be wrong, can I? But it's one of them things.
Right. I mean, what you just described is basically what I said as well about religion getting replaced by this secular religion of, I guess it's like a menu item of leftist belief system, one of which turned out to be this belief in COVID and the reaction from the government.
Hmm.
I'm not sure why it ended up as far as the menu item on the left, because you would expect punk rockers and these types of people to just reject the government's agenda. But in this case, they swallowed it whole and they're still holding on to it, which is really interesting because it's been debunked so many times and all the data's out there. But, in San Francisco, they're still wearing masks, you
Yeah,
know.
it's fucking crazy, man. I mean, yeah, the whole punk rocker thing is absolutely bizarre. Obviously, there are the odd occasions of people, let's say like John Joseph, like he never went down that school of thought, which is
Right.
cool.
But he's
They
an
didn't.
older guy. So he's
Yeah,
he's like an older punk rocker. We're talking about people who are perfectly healthy and they're in their 20s and they're outside, but they're wearing masks, in
yeah,
2024. And this happens. This is like the crazy shit. This actually still happens in the Bay Area. You hardly ever see it around here. And if you see it, it's most likely they're from California or something. Um,
hmm.
and there's like plenty of data around masks as well. I mean, I don't really care if somebody wears a mask or not, but it's just indicative. I can pretty much guess what they believe in as this menu item of everything else. All the other agenda items on that are being pushed, I'm pretty sure they believe in all of them because they're religious zealots. I just know that, they
Yes.
believe in this menu item and they're secular religious zealots.
But you know the terrible impact it had on children because apparently that has this horrible effect on their development if they can't see people's faces when they're
Oh
young.
yeah, I know, I know. We're gonna end up with like an entire generation of autistic kids who grew up in a TikTok world or whatever and had no interaction for 2 or 3 years growing up in COVID, COVID world. Yeah, it's terrible. It's gonna have a long-lasting social impact. And these pharmaceutical companies that push the agenda, they're not going to pay a penny for their damages.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, of course not, and it's listen, man, it's one of them things. It's one of them things. But the best we can do is just never let that fucking spirit of rebellion die. Which at the end of it, let's say with the music that we listen to and the counterculture that we're a part of, as nihilistic as it may be, as crazy and dark and as much as it faces that real darkness, which is an impending possibility, like nuclear war. Now we're arguably the closest we've ever been to that name, than ever
Yeah.
before. But it's about preserving the spirit, which is at the end of the day, that's what we do. I think is or what you do is ultimately a life asserting thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think the spirit of rebellion needs to exist in all of us, even if we're degenerates or we're nihilists. We need to question authority. Don't don't take what I'm saying or as the facts. Is do your research. Don't listen to what the government is saying and take that as some sort of truth. Always question your reality because I think the powerful out there, they're always trying to construct a reality that is going to be anti you.
And I think those are the perfect, powerful words to finish this conversation, my man.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we ended up talking a lot about, non-metal stuff, but I think it all relates to what we're doing in the metal scene. We're trying to create a counterculture that questions authority, goes against the grain, and is always a thorn on the side of the powerful who are trying to push this agenda of bullshit on us.
Absolutely, yes. It's like the piece of flour growing underneath the concrete and the asphalt, but it's still trying to make its way through.
Hmm. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Well, thank you very much for the interview. It's been a very interesting conversation. And I hope that the listeners can get something out of it. And I always say this at the end of interviews, but I'm very Sorry if I ramble on and don't make much sense. I'm always thinking in real time, and I think that's just part of having conversations. You're always exploring, and I might be 100% wrong about everything, you know? We both might be 100% wrong about everything, but we're at least having a conversation and exploring ideas, and that's what everyone should be doing. We should get out of the internet. You know, that might also be hypocritical since we're talking over the internet, but what I mean is we should stop looking at porn. We should be, you know, out of TikTok and Instagram as much as possible. We should definitely not partake in the AI bullshit or the metaverse bullshit. We should reside in this world and create a counterculture that actually is lasting and something that fights against this globalization of bullshit homogeny.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I think that it's now necessary for me to bring you back for another podcast on another time now, because I think
Yeah,
you and I can probably go for way longer than this. Awesome.
yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thank you very much. And um, yeah, let's talk again whenever there's time.
Absolutely, brother. I very much appreciate it. Do you want to? I'm gonna explain everything during the introduction of the episode, but do you just want to let people know what they can keep an eye out of
Oh
for
yeah, let me
for
let me
everything you've got
spam.
coming up?
Yeah, let me spam the Helios fundraiser once again. So
Let's go.
uh, Helios fundraiser is going to start March 1st, and we will offer 5 exclusive records as part of this campaign, as well as services and discounts through my site, Helios, and partner businesses. So it should be interesting to a lot of people. And obviously, we're trying to raise money, so the prices will be a little bit higher, but just know that we're not doing this to enrich ourselves. We're trying to enrich the scene itself and to build a community and foundation for something that's long lasting. So hopefully you can support us in this effort.
Absolutely. I am personally going to be donating as soon as it goes live on March 1st. All right, man. And total support to you and everything that yourself and your team are doing. And to everyone else who's been listening to the episode, hope you guys enjoyed this one. We'll see you on the next episode of Iblis Manifestations.